Chosen ones, brace yourself. What I'm about to say sounds like it was ripped from a movie script, the kind of twist you only see in slow-burning thrillers and late-night conspiracies. But this is not fiction. This is not dramatized rumor. This is not the kind of headline you scroll past at breakfast. The CIA has opened a case on your ex. Take that in. Let it land like a stone dropped into the still pool of your life. The ring of consequence is widening. The truth behind it will blow your mind. Not because it's flashy, but because it rewrites everything you thought you'd already buried. It reframes the heartbreak, the slander, the hidden manipulations, and shows them as pieces of a pattern that have finally come into focus. If that line made your heart skip, type 777 in the comments right now. Let the feed know you are awake, alert, and ready to receive what heaven and history are unveiling. If you have supported this channel with super thanks, know this. Your support is more than currency. It is partnership in prophetic light. Your gift fuels revelation. Your presence helps voice the story of those who have been silenced. I see you. I bless you. Thank you. But listen closely, this is not gossip. This is not a call to revenge. This is revelation, precise, surgical, and piercing, and it will shift how you understand justice, covenant, and the way heaven answers debts laid against the soul. Picture the scene, a life once private, now intersecting with machinery far bigger than a broken heart. The agencies of the world, the quiet offices where patterns are analyzed and trails are followed, do not move for petty drama. They move when threads tie into networks, when actions meant to harm ripple outward into public harm, when a trail of deceit points to systems that enable wrongdoing. Whether or not you like the metaphor, imagine an invisible ledger turning its pages. Every slight, every betrayal, the camera pulling back to show the entire stage, not just the actors. You won't need to shout or grimace for justice. You will live it. Your steadiness, your integrity, your quiet resilience, your refusal to answer violence with violence will be the witness that proves what was always true. And while the world may gawk at the drama of a case or a headline, the deeper work is happening in the courts of conscience and in the quiet recalibration of spiritual scales. God does not forget. He does not miscount. The ledger reconciles. If you're tempted to rehearse old hurts or to poke at the wounds, stop. This is not a time for spectacle. This is a time for evidence and prayer, for practical care, and for the dignity of restraint. Save the screenshots, document the patterns, protect the truth, but do not turn into the very noise that gave them power. Let the truth be collected and curated with the wisdom of counsel, both earthly and divine. Call trusted friends. Seek wise legal advice if there are real-world harms. And most importantly, breathe. Let the realization that you are not the problem, that you were in fact the one who carried light, settle into your bones. Hear me plainly. There is a sacred rhythm at work here. The same scripture that warns us, do not be deceived, God cannot be mocked, is the same scripture that promises restoration. The harvest comes back in measure. That does not mean we gloat over anyone's ruin. It means we trust a process larger than our hurt. The person who tried to extinguish your light will now find themselves in a night of questions they cannot answer. Their laughter will turn thin. Their alliances will feel like sand slipping through clenched hands. When the people who fed the lie begin to sense the truth, their complicity unravels and the pattern reveals itself. And you, chosen one, are not merely a passive subject in this narrative. You are the one who stands in the gap. Every whispered lie that once seemed trivial becomes an entry. The handwriting is relentless. And the moment the ledger is opened is the moment the story you thought finished begins to be read in a whole new language. This revelation arrives like dawn after a long night. You remember the humiliation, the lies, the friends who laughed, the messages that twisted your name. You remember how they tried to turn your light into a punchline. You remember thinking, how could someone be so brazen? What you didn't know, what they never saw, was the architecture of protection that walked with you. Prayers you offered on their behalf, quiet intercessions that intercepted dangers they never recognized, an atmosphere your presence lifted. When they severed that connection, they thought they had escaped the consequences. They were wrong, because some actions leave fingerprints that time cannot erase, and some decisions set in motion sequences that do not require human permission to finish. I know how this feels. It is a strange relief and a strange disquiet all at once. Relief because truth shows up at last. Disquiet because the machinery of accountability can be slow, complex, and frightening to imagine. But here's the thing. Whether the unmasking comes through human investigators or through the slow, unrelenting justice of the universe, the outcome is the same. Deception corrodes from the inside. Alliances built on convenience crumble when the foundation is revealed to be sand. People who once celebrated the lie begin to suspect, then to question, then to withdraw. The very crowd that cheered them on can become the chorus that turns its head. What looked like safety becomes exposure. What looked like cleverness becomes the document that proves the scheme. So do not shrink back in fear. Lean in with sober courage. This moment is not a disaster for you. It is vindication in progress. It is the sound of the record needle finally finding its groove. Who prayed when no one was watching, who worshipped through the wreckage, who refused to dim the light. This revelation is not about elevating your ex. It's about restoring your testimony. It is about the world catching up to what heaven already knew. You were never ordinary. You were chosen. You carried a frequency that shifted atmospheres. Their attempt to burn that down only made the smoke point back to them. And smoke, by nature, exposes fire. Now the smoke is filling their own house. So type 777 if you're awake, if you are ready to see deception unmasked, if you are ready to walk into the restoration that follows accountability. If you've supported this mission with super thanks, believe me, your support is included in the prayer that surrounds this revelation. This channel is not here to stoke vengeance. It is here to shine a light, to comfort the wounded, and to proclaim that justice, both human and divine, has its seasons. The CIA opening a case on your ex is the dramatic image. The deeper truth is that no act against a chosen one goes quietly uncounted. The truth will blow your mind because it rearranges what you thought was final into a beginning you didn't see coming. Stay with me. The rest of the story is coming, and it will change everything that a breakup can be ordinary. People drift. Seasons change. But what happened in your life, what they did to you, was not ordinary. It was a masked ambush, a carefully staged betrayal that wore the face of tenderness and called itself love, when in fact it functioned like a spiritual strike, surgical and secret, designed to wound the very things in you that breathed and built. They did not simply step away and let the story close. They engineered exits, recruited voices that sneered at your light, and stitched together alliances with those who delighted in shadow. They mocked your healing as weakness. They laughed at your prayers, as if devotion were a novelty rather than a fortress. They traded covenant for convenience, swapping solemn promises for passing comforts, and in that exchange they revealed the true currency of their heart. not loyalty, not honor, but opportunism that glitters in daylight and rusts by dusk. Listen closely. Galatians 6 verse 7 lays down the law of moral arithmetic. Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. That is not merely a proverb to be quoted in a sermon. It is a ledger system woven into the fabric of reality. Whatever seeds they scatter in the soil of your life, slander disguised as conversation, spiritual sabotage dressed as advice, malice hidden behind smiles, those seeds are not lost to wind. They germinate, and the harvest that rises from their hands will be of the same root. This harvest does not always look like gossip blown louder on social media. Sometimes it appears as a chain of small consequences that, when laid end to end, form an undeniable pattern. Failed alliances, eroding reputations, opportunities that dry up, nights of restless thought, the slow unraveling of a life once propped by falsehoods. Think of it this way. People who weaponize another's name forget that the world keeps records, not just in ink and pixels, but in pattern and consequence. Words thrown like stones return with their own echoes. Choices made in secret carry an imprint. Decisions cut with selfish hands leave fingerprints on the future. The ledger keeps every entry, not because it delights in tallying pain, but because order must be restored. Justice, like a tide, does not rush in as a circus. It arrives as a rearrangement of balance. What they thought was clever will become conspicuous. The alliances they leaned on will reveal their fragility. Those who cheered them on will see how closely their applause once mirrored the very lies that now expose them. The harvest is impartial. It is simply the natural return of cause to effect, and it will present itself with the same clarity daylight gives to things that were murky by lamplight. Do not mistake patience for passivity. Watching the ledger balance itself is not the same as endorsing cruelty. There is a difference between rejoicing in another's downfall and recognizing the moral economy at work that brings accountability. Your role is neither judge nor executioner. Your role is witness to truth, to endurance, to the quiet, steady ways God rights wrongs without the noise of human vengeance. You preserved dignity in the dark. You prayed when it was easier to curse. You held your tongue when the world demanded spectacle. Those choices are not invisible. They function like anchors. They hold your testimony steady while the storm of consequence rearranges itself around those who sought to unsettle you. Notice also that harvest can be redemptive. Sometimes the consequence becomes the instrument of awakening, a reckoning that humiliates pride and invites repentance. Other times it simply exposes dysfunction and protects the innocent from further harm. Either way, the truth comes home. The ledger is not petty, it is precise. It differentiates between accidents and betrayals, between human error and calculated harm. What was sown in secret will find the light. What was hidden in the closet will be aired in the sun. The people who thought they had escaped accountability will find reality more stubborn than their denials. Their laughter will thin. Their sleep will fracture. The hollow places they attempted to fill with new alliances will prove incapable of hosting genuine blessing. You will watch, perhaps from a distance, as the pattern becomes plain, and in that watching you will be vindicated without having to shout for vindication. Oh, collect the evidence, yes. Preserve the threads that connect their choices to their consequences, but do so with the dignity of one who knows the final judgment is not your office. Tend to your wounds with care. Surround yourself with truth-tellers who will help you document what is necessary, and then let the rest go into the hands of a justice that is both human and divine. Keep your heart unburned by bitterness. Let the wisdom of Scripture and the cool steadiness of prayer be your corrections, not a fevered appetite for payback. In time, you will see how what they planted grows into only what its root could sustain, and how your own life, watered by resilience and faith, rises in ways their cruelty never intended nor could have predicted. That I want you to understand something fundamental, because this insight changes how you interpret the past and how you move through the future. The universe records far more than you have been taught to notice. Energy does not simply vanish when a moment passes. Words spoken in anger, prayers offered in secret, vows made at midnight. These are not ephemeral sparks that die when the conversation ends. They are seams sewn into the fabric of reality. They leave an imprint. They set a tone. They produce resonance. When two souls connect, something material and something metaphysical are layered together. Promises, intercession, habits of speech, patterns of blessing or cursing. These things register. They accumulate. They have effects that outlast the dinner conversations and the late-night fights. Think about a covenant for a moment the way an architect thinks about a building. A covenant is not a casual handshake. It is not a flimsy agreement scribbled on the back of a napkin. It is a foundational beam. It is part of the architecture of a life together. When you entered that relationship, you carried more than your personality. You brought an atmosphere. You brought prayers you may have offered quietly for their work, their health, their family. You brought a rhythm of worship, a pattern of humility, a discipline of forgiveness. And those things, like hidden buttresses, supported the structure of their days. You were a covering, unseen but functional, an invisible roof that shielded them from storms they didn't even know how to name. Hebrews 13 verse 20 speaks to this authority of covenant and provision when it prays that God will equip you with everything good to do His will, working in us that which is pleasing in His sight through Jesus Christ. That verse is not a sentimental platitude. It is a testimony to how covenant life mobilizes resources from the unseen into the seen. A covenant with a chosen one attracts protection because it aligns with purposes larger than momentary pleasure. It orients toward destiny. It changes atmospheres because the spiritual laws respond to faithfulness, to the steady insistence of one person standing in the gap, even when the other person wanders. So when someone severs that cord, when they renounce, betray, mock, or abandon the covenant, the consequences are not merely emotional. They are architectural. Imagine a carefully built canopy over a path. The canopy whispered security into every step, muffled dangers, directed blessings. Cut the supports, and the path is exposed. The one who had been walking under that canopy now feels the wind in a different way. They are suddenly vulnerable to storms they once passed through safely. The protection that walked with them is no longer there. The covering that absorbed slings and arrows has been removed. That removal is not merely a metaphor for loneliness. It is a spiritual alteration of environment. This is why I say the universe records much more than you think. It records the way one person's consistent prayer life created an atmosphere in which decisions were steered toward blessing. That it records the way a faithful intercession softened hard consequences that would have otherwise landed full force. It records the small acts of righteousness that added up to an invisible hedge. Energy, in the form of devotion, discipline, and intercession, has momentum. Momentum bends circumstances. Momentum stabilizes marriages, careers, homes. When that momentum is withdrawn, the equilibrium shifts. You also need to understand that covenants are not neutral. They are directional. A covenant points you, it orients you. It aligns habits, preconditions, and even opportunities toward a shared trajectory. In practical terms, that can mean doors open in ways that are not easily explained by merit alone. It can mean relational peace that prevents unnecessary conflicts. It can mean timely provision. In spiritual terms, it can mean the literal halting of harm that otherwise would have come. So interfering with another person's covenantal covering is not a trivial offense. It is an act that disturbs the flow of blessing and protection ordained for both parties. Now, consider the moral logic of this structure. If goodness attracts protection and faithfulness generates a covering, then betrayal or malicious intent inevitably produces its own consequences. There's a moral gravity to choices. When someone breaks a covenant, they don't just lose a person. They dismantle a network of holy cause and effect that has been operating in their favor. The roof that sheltered their steps also diverted certain dangers away from them. Remove that roof, and the paths once guarded now intersect with risk. The world does not conspire to punish. Rather, patterns established by human action and spiritual dynamics produce effect. The result can look like sudden misfortune, but often it is the natural return of an altered spiritual economy. This explanation is not offered to allow you to gloat or to wish harm on anyone. It is offered so you can grasp the seriousness of what covenant means, and so you can take wise, dignified action in its aftermath. If your covering has been severed, collect yourself with prudence. Secure evidence of wrongdoing where applicable. Get wise counsel and care for your emotional and spiritual well-being. But also understand your dignity in this process. You were a steward of a sacred thing. Your prayers, your faithfulness, your consistency are not wasted. They remain part of the ledger that governs future outcomes. They remain in the atmospheric memory of your community and your story. Finally, let this truth embolden you, not terrorize you. To know that energy registers is to know you are never truly alone in your faithfulness. The prayers you prayed in the quiet are effective, even if no one applauds. The discipline you kept in the dark set into motion protections you cannot always see, but which God can. If someone severed a covenant with you, remember that such a breach also exposes them. They have walked away from a covering that benefited them and often did so without comprehension. That absence will reveal itself in time. The ledger, impartial and exacting, will make entries that clarify the pattern. So walk forward in steadiness. Rebuild with wisdom. Guard your heart with mature gentleness. Celebrate the reality that covenant matters, that energy leaves a trace, and that faithfulness, even when unseen, is potent and enduring. You may think the phrase the CIA opened a case is hyperbole, a dramatic flourish for effect. If that's your first reaction, I want you to slow down and listen carefully, because whether a literal investigator ever knocks on their door or not, the core principle remains the same, and it is far more consequential than theatrical wording. There are two worlds that run side by side. The visible world of documents, phone calls, and social scenes, and an invisible economy of reputation, pattern, and consequence. When someone weaponizes your name, when they fling it into conversation to hurt you, to cover their tracks, to distract from their own guilt, they do more than tell a lie. They stitch themselves into networks of deception. They create trails. Those trails don't evaporate. They accumulate. They cross paths with other trails. And every time a thread is tied, the pattern gains structure. Consider how real investigations unfold. Spies aren't caught because one person trips over a single mistake. They're undone by the small things that, when woven together, reveal a map. Phone records that show a strange midnight call, bank transfers that line up with suspicious purchases, witness statements that echo the same fabricated story, movements that repeat with uncanny regularity. Institutions that specialize in pattern recognition don't look for a smoking gun. They look for the smoke itself, the recurring heat signatures. That is how large systems catch what seem to be hidden. They follow the architecture of behavior. Now transpose that same method to spiritual treachery. The lies your ex propagated, the people they rallied to their side, the way they concealed resources or twisted the truth. These are the intangible equivalents of phone records and bank transfers. They are not random. They form patterns. A joke repeated in different rooms, a rumor whispered to multiple acquaintances, the same defensive posture in different conversations. These are echoes of a constructed narrative. Each echo leaves an imprint in the social field. Over time, those imprints align into something discernible, the pattern of a lie. Patterns are stubborn. They persist across contexts. Something told a dozen different ways to a dozen different audiences rarely stays perfectly consistent. Discrepancies emerge. Those discrepancies are where truth and falsehood diverge. People who stood inside the lie begin to trip over contradictions. Allies who once cheered find themselves puzzled by the inconsistencies. The very network that seemed impenetrable starts to buckle under the weight of its own contradictions. And there is more. Treachery breeds inward pressure. Alliances formed for convenience are brittle by nature. When stress comes, legal exposure, financial strain, or even the simple anxiety of maintaining a lie, the weakest links fray first. Former supporters hesitate. Partners hedge their bets. Paranoia spreads like a smell. Those who once comforted the deceiver begin to look over their shoulders. That paranoia is not just an emotional response. It is evidence. It signals that the pattern is now visible enough to be dangerous to the conspirators themselves. You must also understand the ripple dynamic. When one person attempts to hide culpability by pointing blame, the effort to cover often connects them to other compromises. Attempts to obscure a truth require complicity. Complicity creates relationships that were never meant for longevity. The longer the web gets, the thinner its threads become. So an initial act of betrayal that seemed isolated at first, a lie, a slander, a misappropriation, can expand into a map of interlocking decisions. Pull one thread and the design unravels. And unraveling can be revealing in ways that feel dramatic even if no government agency is involved. Community members notice patterns of behavior. Someone's promises fail in the same way over and over. Someone's relationships collapse under similar circumstances. Someone repeatedly leaves a trail of burned bridges wherever they go. Over time, the pattern becomes obvious to those who care to look. The social ledger, the living record of how people behave toward one another, begins to balance itself. Eyes open, whispers grow bolder, protections shift. This is why I say, don't be comforted by the word hyperbole. The metaphor points to a real structural truth. Whether the exposure comes through formal systems of detection or through the informal systems of conscience and community, a life built on deception will leave traces that cannot be fully erased. That is the hope in this observation. Truth has a way of asserting itself not only through law, but through pattern recognition, through the slow, steady alignment of facts that eventually make sense of what once seemed inexplicable. So if you have been harmed, continue to preserve what you can. Collect what is tangible: messages, receipts, any record that links actions to outcomes. But more than that, know this: the invisible trail of spiritual treachery is as real as any paper trail. Lies leave footprints in relationship. Hypocrisy leaves fingerprints on influence. Betrayal leaves a geometry of broken trust. Over time, those shapes become readable. The people who thought they could walk away unscathed will find that the architecture of their choices has already told a story, and the story seldom honors the liar. Again, do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. Say that out loud and let it settle in your bones, because it changes how you interpret every slight, every rumor, every attempt to rewrite your story. The scripture here is not soft sentiment or ornamental language to dress a sermon. It functions like a legal instrument in the courtroom of the heavens, precise, binding, and consequential. When Psalm 34 verse 21 tells us, "Evil will slay the wicked, the foes of the righteous will be condemned," it is not moralizing poetry. It is a sober declaration of cause and effect written into the moral architecture of the world. Isaiah's thunder, that there is no peace for the wicked, Isaiah 48 verse 22, is not a threat whispered in anger. It is an observation about the inner mechanics of wrongdoing. Guilt is a pressure that never rests. Deception is a furnace that eventually consumes the thing that fed it. These are assurances, not threats. There is an order to justice, and that order is exact. Think of it like this: every act of wickedness is an input into a machine that returns output in kind. It may take seasons for the mechanism to complete its cycle. It may look like coincidence, misfortune, or the slow unwinding of circumstances. But the machine is real. Patterns add up, and the ledger keeps tally. People who believe themselves clever, who thought they could light someone else's life on fire and slip away unscathed, forgot the simplest and most stubborn rule of spiritual cause and effect. Smoke does not vanish when the flames are under someone else's roof. Smoke drifts, lingers, clings to pores and clothes. It tells a story. The consequences of igniting harm rarely remain confined to the intended target. They curl back, sometimes gently, sometimes with the force of a gale, and they settle where the arsonist least expects, in their own home, in their own reputation, in the quiet places of their mind. Their confidence was not wisdom. It was arrogance disguised as cleverness. They mistook audacity for invulnerability. They believed that if they were loud enough, smooth enough, or strategic enough, they could engineer an escape hatch from responsibility. But arrogance has a habit of creating blind spots. The ledger, impartial and patient, watches. It is not vindictive. It is forensic. It remembers the pattern of conversations, the timing of lies, the network of excuses. Like a meticulous clerk, the ledger collects testimony. Who said what, who benefited, who profited from the smear. Over time, those entries accumulate into an account that becomes undeniable. There is also an internal harvest. What they sow into cruelty and deceit becomes the soil in which their future must grow. A heart that nurtures malice becomes a field that cannot sustain life. The things they cultivated, paranoia, bitterness, dependency on appearances, are infertile. They cannot bear true fruit. So even if no human court convicts them, Their inner world will reflect the quality of what they planted. Insomnia, fractured relationships, the slow evaporation of trust, opportunities that close without warning. The harvest may appear in business, in health, in the subtle erosion of joy. In that way, divine justice is not always dramatic. Often it is quiet and inevitable, the way a river slowly carves a canyon out of stone. Still, the scriptural assurances should not be misread as encouragement to gloat or celebrate someone's downfall. Wisdom refuses to indulge in schadenfreude. The point is not to relish ruin. The point is to recognize that the universe is just at a depth our eyes do not always see. Knowing this should comfort you, not harden you. It should steady your spirit, not ignite your desire for retaliation. You are called to a higher posture, to let truth vindicate you while you keep your heart clean. Let the ledger do its work. Continue to live with integrity. Continue to pray. Continue to refuse the reflex of bitterness. In doing so, you demonstrate the difference between one who is marked by grace and one who is marked by greed. Practical life intersects with this spiritual reality. Preserve what is true. Keep records, save messages, document patterns, because sometimes the visible ledger and the invisible ledger overlap, and human institutions of accountability will need evidence to act. But do this without turning your life into a courtroom drama. Protect yourself with quiet prudence, and let providence handle what you cannot. Seek counsel where necessary, and let wise people help you distinguish between righteous action and revenge. Finally, embed this truth into your daily rhythm. When slander comes, do not panic. Record and pray. When reputation falters, do not panic. Work and persevere. When nights are heavy with the memory of betrayal, remember that the same scriptures that warn the wicked also promise restoration for the righteous. The harvest comes, not always according to our calendars, but always according to a moral economy that refuses to be outrun. Keep walking in the light you were given. Keep living as one who cannot be mocked, because your life is not built on vanity, but on covenant. The ledger will balance, and when it does, the quiet confirmation of truth will be more vindicating than any vindication you could have shouted into the wind. History is a mirror, and if you dare to look deeply, you'll see it reflects not just the grand tragedies of kings and artists, but also the personal dramas written into the fabric of ordinary lives. Patterns repeat because the human heart has not changed. Pride still corrodes. Envy still blinds. Betrayal still eats away at the betrayer long before its sting fades from the betrayed. Take Caravaggio. His genius was undeniable. His art still glows with a fire that can't be imitated. Yet the same man who painted light and shadow with divine brilliance lived in shadows of his own making. His alliances with darkness, violence, arrogance, and rebellion against authority consumed his life. The irony was cruel. He could capture the beauty of redemption in paint, but refused to embrace it in spirit. His gift survived him, but his choices destroyed him. Look at King Saul, a man chosen, anointed, given favor by God himself. He began with humility, hiding among baggage when the crown was announced. But jealousy, once seeded, grew into poison. Saul could not bear David's rise. He could not stomach the thought that his throne was temporary, that his story had a divine limit. So he grasped, he chased, he weaponized his authority to destroy the one who was meant to heal his kingdom. And in the end, Saul lost not only his throne, but his peace, his legacy, his very life. Favor evaporated when envy overtook obedience. Think of Macbeth, Shakespeare's tragic testament to ambition without conscience. He began as a warrior, valiant and celebrated. But whispers of power, from witches, from his own restless desire, from Lady Macbeth's relentless urgings, led him down a path where every choice stained his hands deeper in blood. The crown was won, but peace was lost. He traded honor for paranoia, victory for madness. His throne became his prison. Every smile he gave was suspicious. Every ally seemed like an enemy. The prophecy that lured him became the chain that strangled him. Or Milton's Lucifer in Paradise Lost, pride incarnate. Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven, he declared. But what looked like defiance was exile dressed in glamour. Control became emptiness. Rebellion became chains. The fall was not a dramatic moment in time, but a condition that calcified over eternity. The brilliance that once radiated became a shadow that could never escape its own refusal of grace. Now look at your ex. Their story may seem smaller, but the arc is the same. The same ingredients, the same decay. They celebrated the mask, not the presence. They valued appearances over authenticity. They wore charm like armor, but it was hollow. They believed alliances with darkness would protect them. Friends who mocked your prayers, enablers who whispered poison into their ears, crowds who cheered their cruelty. But history proves this pattern never sustains. The applause of the unfaithful always withers. The alliances of convenience always collapse. The mask always cracks. Already the unraveling has begun. Their laughter, once sharp and mocking, is now the soundtrack of their own undoing. The very humor they use to ridicule your healing is turning into a bitter echo in their own chest. The people who once applauded them are beginning to glance sideways, suspicion creeping into their smiles. Trust evaporates quickly in an atmosphere built on betrayal. A person who betrays once is assumed to betray again. Those who celebrated their escape from you are beginning to wonder. If they mocked covenant once, will they not mock me too? The throne they imagined, the seat of power, control, admiration, is already becoming an echo chamber of regret. Relationships that once endured minor friction begin to collapse under the load of unresolved tensions. Work that used to be done with diligence becomes haphazard, and most quietly dangerous of all, they begin to substitute surface charm for the substance of character. Where once they were corrected into consistency, they now polish an image to cover the crack. That polish may fool the crowd for a while, but it cannot restore the internal tuning that produced the original sound. And because people are pattern readers, those closest to them, colleagues, friends, new partners, begin to notice the mismatch between glossy performance and brittle interior. Suspicion grows. The applause that once validated them thins out. There's a sorrow in all this that is easy to misunderstand. You may be tempted to take satisfaction at their unease, but the real grief is that someone wasted a gift. Someone tossed away a covering they did not understand. They forfeited a grace that had been protecting them. That loss is ultimately tragic for everyone involved, because it deprives them of the chance to become the person they might have been with your ongoing presence and intercession. Their haunting nights are a hidden lament, the sound of potential squandered, of better choices unmet. For you, the knowledge that your steady hands once tuned them should spur compassion, not gloating. You too know the cost of what was lost. There's also a redemptive possibility here. Sometimes the loudness of silence becomes the catalyst for change. The emptiness that follows losing a tuner can become a beginning. stripped of easy rehearsals and borrowed discipline. Some people finally face the raw core of who they are. The crisis of identity can force them to seek new sources of tuning: spiritual mentors, therapy, accountability, honest confession, true repentance. When they choose that path, the nights that once roared with absence can gradually be filled with intentional practice. New prayers learned, new rhythms adopted, a reconstructed moral ear trained by humility rather than by borrowed ease. But this turning is rare, and it requires a break from pride. So what should you do while this is happening? First, guard your heart. Don't be pulled back into the drama of their haunting nights. Your role was not to be their perpetual fixer. It was often to be a stabilizing presence while you were present. Second, pray, not for their punishment, but for their awakening. Pray that the silence becomes a schoolroom where truth is learned, not a prison of despair. Third, set healthy boundaries. If their unraveling invites toxicity back into your life, protect yourself. Finally, live in the steadiness that once tuned them. Your continued integrity, your quiet faithfulness, your refusal to be seduced into petty retaliation. These are the primary witness that the lost frequency was real and powerful. In the end, their loud nights are both indictment and opportunity. They indict the foolishness of abandoning what truly mattered. They offer the rare chance for a soul to see what they have been missing. You, who once helped set the pitch, now move onward in service to a larger song. Keep your rhythm true. Let your life be the steady note that proves a higher harmony exists. If they return wiser, it will be because the silence taught them. If they do not, your call remains the same: to live tuned to heaven, not to human applause. This is not private. Betrayal never stays confined to the secret chamber where it was born. Its venom does not remain sealed in the bottle of personal choice. It leaks, it spreads, it saturates. The poison of betrayal is corrosive by nature, and once released, it seeps into every channel of life: relationships, work, finances, reputation, even the way a person perceives themselves. What once was fertile begins to wither. What once flowed with promise begins to run dry.